Call this special meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. We're going to start with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Sunshine Law notice. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. This meeting is being held in person and through the Zoom meeting platform being broadcast from Borough Hall, 748 River Road, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this special council meeting of January 30th, 2023 is available by calling phone number or through web conference Zoom. Members of the public will be on mute until it is time for questions or comments, which will be announced. At that time, the public has the opportunity to question or comment by phone or through Zoom by the raise hand button and will be called on at the appropriate time. This meeting is being called pursuant to resolution number 2023-54 sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, the Hub, and the Star Ledger on January 25th, 2023, posted on the Borough website. The bulletin board in municipal building has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of this meeting. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Cole, Tony, here, Cox, here, La Barbera,
Here.
Neff, here, Rodriguez.
Here. Thank you. We are going to start right off the bat with Matt Martin. He's the president of Scope Engineering. Matt? You're on mute. Matt.
There we go. Okay, now we're off mute. Hello.
Oh,
How are you?
Doing well. How's everybody else?
great.
Okay, I guess I'll just get started. I guess everybody knows that I went out and I did an evaluation of the DPW building, I guess you can call it. It is, it's a building used for mainly, I guess, maintenance of the township vehicles and has some small office space inside. I was asked to do a structural evaluation of the building for consideration for some possible, I guess, future improvements, renovations, upgrades, something of that sort. And I went out there, I guess, about a week ago. I don't know the exact date, previous Friday, and inspected all the components of the building, took measurements. We drew as-built plans of the building. Based on those as-built plans and the inspection that we performed, came back here to the office and ran calculations on all the components. Joe, who's sitting over here to my right, got to do most of the good hardcore calculation work. We base our calculations on, the building was built in 1974. So obviously wasn't under the current code compliance, but we, for evaluation purposes, we compare what's there today to what is the current code, which is the 2018 International Building Code. And we also use what's called the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASC 716, which is basically the minimum design loads and associated criteria for buildings and other structures. So we use those references to determine all the components of the building that are there. Generally, if you're familiar with the building, it is a very simple building, basically a large shed. It is mainly a roof structure supported by posts, wood posts around the perimeter, steel posts on the inside, and wood frame roof, standard rafter roof. This one's actually 2x10s at 32 inches on center, and it's supporting what I believe would be considered to be a Tectum structural supported roof system in between those roof rafters. Anyway, based on our evaluation, we checked the roof itself all of the roof components actually meet current code for the 20 pounds per square foot snow load required for the area. All the posts meet the load-bearing requirements. The visible parts of the footings that we saw, we actually did a probe down to the footing. The footing is more than adequate, probably twice the size required around the perimeter of the building to carry the building. So generally, the building meets all of current code requirements to be considered structurally sound. However, there were a few basic, I would say, repairs that need to be done. There was some rot of some of the posts where termites did a little bit of damage. The roof itself, as far as the roof rafters go, we did wind uplift calculations on the roof. And one of the recommendations we're going to make is just to maybe put on some hurricane ties. Current building code requires that buildings are supposed to be secured from the roof through all the systems and components through the building down to the footing with a continuous uplift, meeting the uplift requirement throughout that system. So we really couldn't verify that it met that 100%, but that's actually a minor repair as far as upgrading the building to meet that requirement if you were to move forward and do renovations to this building. The building is basically a freestanding building, so any renovations, or from what I understand, some talk about maybe putting some office space inside the building. I mean, really, the building has no value as far as renovating the building itself, but what it can provide is inside of the structure itself, you could build into any addition that you make or office space that you provide is basically going to be a standalone addition built inside of the building. You really can't attach or use this building for any kind of expansion or renovation per se. You would actually, if you were to build office space or anything like that inside of this building, you would be building a new structure within the building itself. One of the other, I wouldn't say it's not a major deficiency, but if you were to move forward by putting something inside of the building or renovating the building, the existing building, like I said, is mainly held up by wood posts. I would consider it to be a post and beam structure. And then around the perimeters, there's wood frame walls built between those posts, and those wood frame walls are what are put there to give the building stability. And per code, there's a minimum requirement that there be a wall put in, they're called shear walls, and they basically keep the building from racking, because all the other structural components, load-bearing wise, are fine for this building, but it is lacking the minimum amount of shear wall requirement. Current code requires that there be a shear wall as a maximum of, what, 35 feet on center, Joe? And front to back on this building, you're at 60 feet, and going left to right between any shear walls, or what would be called, those ones are short by, I think the maximum, we have 45 feet where 35 feet is. But anyway, any renovation to the building could incorporate that pretty easily. So generally, the building's structurally sound. I would consider it to be, I guess we can use the word serviceable, to be considered to be used as it's currently used, with some minor repairs suggested, and can definitely be used with consideration for any kind of continued use, but maybe expanding the use for some additional office space inside. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, Matt, just based on what you saw. You're talking about hurricane ties and, I hear the word minor.
Right.
Is from your standpoint, to upgrade this to what you're talking about, is there a heavy investment from your end?
Relative to building into a building, no, it's actually, when I say minor, that's what I mean. So I'll give you an example. Like right now, the roof rafters are, there's 2x10, basically we'll call them roof rafters or ceiling joists, space 16 on center between the main beams running across the middle of the building. Right now, they're toe-nailed into the building, into the top of the main beam. And when we do an uplift calculation for that, we really can't verify that because they're spaced 32 inches on center, there's actually quite a bit of load, a lot more load on each joist than there would be for a typical roof. Now, the repair for that would be, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, it's called a hurricane tie. It's a simple metal clip that's maybe, it's a Simpson strong tie product. It's called an H25A. It may cost, you may have maybe 200 of them for the building, and they run somewhere in the range of $3 a piece. So, and then there's a few other like smaller connections like that, straps and things like that. So when I say minor, I really mean it's not, $100,000. We're talking maybe $2,000 worth of, $2,000 to $3,000 worth of like metal ties and clips that will take care of the whole building.
All right, thank you. And then my follow-up question there is, if we were to make these changes, and obviously you don't have all the information right now, but if we were to bring this building up to 2023 standards, do you have an idea on longevity? Could we get another 30 years out of this building from what?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's really not, there's not a whole lot of, there's a few locations where there's some damage. And, I have some pictures if anybody wants to see them, but there's like, the building was used for salt, to store salt at one time. So on the right-hand side of the building where the salt, where there was a heavy salt presence, and the metal connections at the ground were there, some of the concrete that was exposed deteriorated a little bit with some, and then any metal that was there, because the galvanized with the salt just rots away anyway. But generally, like I said, it's, as far as the overall condition of the building, it's 90%, 98%, I would say serviceable and functional, and can be for, 20, 30 more years. Other than the roof structure system is fine. The roof itself, which like I said, I believe is what's called a Tectum product. It's an actual structural panel. There were some leaks, so a roofing company would have to come in and determine what, to what extent some of those might need to be replaced. But overall, it seemed to be, for the age of the building, 1974. There was, like I said, basically the building is serviceable. That's what a good word to use.
Councilman Neff?
I just wanted to confirm, assuming that we put in a new roof and remodel the building, can the roof support solar panels?
It can. We actually looked into that and did a calculation for that. Okay, there's different types of roofs, solar systems. We actually do quite a bit of them for a solar company. We have to evaluate every roof that they put solar systems on. And this system here, while it actually could support, typically a solar system adds somewhere in the range of 5 pounds per square foot to any roof system that it goes on. But there's different types that maybe could add a little bit more. But depending on the system that gets put on there, yes, it could definitely handle a solar system. Either directly on the roof rafters or joists, or if it gets close, or there's some the main beams that run every 16 feet all the way across the building on center, any system that could go on there could be spanned between those also to actually provide support for any kind of solar system that you want on.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Matt, thank you very much for your time and for putting this together, turning around so quickly. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
All
you.
right, take care.
Right, next up, we're gonna move along. Councilman LaBarbera will present an update on the police department and public works.
Yeah, absolutely. Allison, you mind bringing up V2 and just sharing screen? Can we just want to confirm that you can see it once we share? Yep. And then do you have to share one more time? I think moving it might have stopped the share. Just wanna double check. Can you guys see it on the computer?
Mhm. It doesn't
No,
say share on the top.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, do the people on the Zoom see? it?
Oh, I think that that's.
You know?
Hit stop real quick. Yep. And then share the main screen. Yep. I hit share and then it should, there we go.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Can we go to slide 2? So we'll keep it to DPW. We want to focus on that. We'll do like a break point. These were the action items that came out of 23 January. So with DPW, the roof proposals, fuel tank replacement, LSRP, and structural engineer. We'll come back to PD. If we go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk to 3 updates before coming back to the structural engineer real quick. So the roof, in case the governing body decides to move forward with renovating Vice new building, Rich worked to get 3 proposals, 3 specific companies that would do the assessment, bid specs, cost estimate, and phasing for not only the DPW roof, but the lower roof for Borough Hall. Package it together, get economies of scale. We did talk a little bit about infrared analysis when we get into roof proposals. I'll let you talk to that. Pending the completion of this, when this company does this work, then they can put out the bid, we can have the contractor be mobilized and move forward. Again, that's all contingent upon the decision to renovate Vice new building. Obviously, if we decide to go new building, it doesn't make sense to replace the roof. The fuel tank replacement, so those end of life fuel tanks on site. We're working, there are local towns in our vicinity that previously have done this, and working with them to get quotes and make sure we're doing our due diligence. Okay, LSRP. So on 26 Jan, we met with CME and we went over the 5 AOCs. So if you recall back, I believe on January 9th, we went through the areas of concern at DPW. I think there were 7, 2 of which were okay, and then there were 5. These have to be remediated per the DEP remediation requirements, we call them, by July 2025. Hard stop, have to be remediated. Now, there are varying levels of remediation, how the DEP defines it. And it also is contingent upon how much the site is disturbed. So depending on the decision to either renovate or pursue a new DPW building, the mitigation of these 5 AOCs can be done in a phased approach. And again, remediation, there's different almost tiers of it, depending on how much you disturb and what we ultimately decide. CME was put on hold as conversations were happening, so we're able to pick this right up, and the plan is to, because even if we were going to renovate, even if we were going to do the building, even if we weren't going to do the roof, the AOCs have to be remediated by July of 2025. So those are those 3 updates. Next slide. So just a really, to boil it back, down. So here's just some more. Nope, you're good. Slide 4. So just here's some of the background that Matt was referencing, just so we're on the same page, right? The DT came out. In this presentation, which we made available, the appendices include the as-is renderings and all of that detail for consumption. Ultimately provided the plans. And that third bullet there was his executive summary. So the design of the structure meets the minimum structural requirements to be considered structurally sound. No reason for the building not to be considered quote unquote serviceable. The final report that's coming out is merely, remember I was talking about like the hurricane ties and talking about like those metal pieces.
he's gonna provide the exact spec, I think, Rich, of what those are and everything for the report. And all of that, again, if we decide to renovate, all of that will inform the architect that's selected. And Matt has no issue answering questions, working, et cetera, with them. Next slide. He talked about the roof components, just from an education perspective. There were 5 roof rafters, roof beams, support post wall, footings, foundation, shear walls. So these are standard terms, Rich, right? That you look at from a structural perspective. I specifically want to call out that hurricane tie in there from a wind load perspective. Think wind load as, you know, shifting the building left to right, right? So if you blew really, really hard on it one way, you don't want to blow over. That's what the one aspect that deals with. So with that, next slide. It really boils down to some proposed next steps, right? The decision points are renovate or build new. If the decision is to renovate, we can discuss right now the roof entity that we're going to move forward with. We'll continue to work on the end-of-life fuel tanks, continue to work to meet the LSRP, begin architect discussion. The one thing we wanted to call out here specifically was the landscape architect. So in a lot of these discussions, it talked about the residential friendliness of the DPW site. There are not only quite a few landscape architects that live in Fairhaven that we hope maybe might provide their services pro bono, but landscape architect is really, really important to talk about making that site more residentially friendly. Separated out potential milestones. So the roof separate from the building itself, just so we can discern. So that's DPW in a nutshell. So really it boils down to decision point, like we did with PD. Do we renovate or go new? If we renovate, we can discuss the roof proposals that were sent out and ultimately select one if the government decides to move forward so we can get the roof replaced. As we discussed with DPW, there's 2 critical in life risks. The roof is one of them. It hasn't fallen and hit anybody yet, so it hasn't become an issue. And then the egress from the back office as far as being able to get at. So I can show the appendices if you guys want with the as-is buildings, but I think everybody's gonna go by.
It's all gonna be on the Borough website, right?
Correct, yep.
Can we talk about the financial figures? Maybe just remind us what the difference in price is between the renovation and the newly built.
Yep.
So maybe we can, because I think one of the questions was, if we do a renovation, how many, can we have a big surprise, right?
Check,
And
check.
end up in the same place.
Yep, understood.
Do we feel better now that we have the structural engineer provide his opinion now? That maybe the surprises might not be there, or will we still have surprises? You know,
So,
I think maybe that will help us maybe make a decision.
yeah, so for me personally, I feel much better with the structural assessment. I also feel better with the LSRP and what they articulate about the remediation and what that looks like. I'm gonna look back. I believe the difference between a new build and renovation for Brian Mead was 1.4 million, but I just want to confirm that that was how much he expected. Now, what's very important to note though, that 1.4 million, there are so many other costs that aren't factored into that. New furniture, concrete and steel inspections that have to happen. We can't waive those fees. There's a whole slew of them, and I can read them out. Let me go back real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm just switching gears a little bit. On my mind.
Just to be clear, the 1.4 million is the difference between the renovation and the Butler building,
The Butler
building.
not the original design.
Correct, the Butler building. I apologize. Yes, that's correct. Let me pull this up real quick. I think it was on January 9th we did it. Yeah, so the renovation, this was Bob Brian Mead's assessment. Now, this includes the subtotal of the building itself, right? General conditions, overhead and profit, design contingency, soft cost, bond insurance, and then escalation. Renovation cost was 2.8 million, 2.799 to 2.949. The new building, Butler building, was 4.122 to 4.39. And it's a 33% more cost, and I think it was 1.4 million. I don't have the exact number here. on my computer, but if we did the math real quick,
It's significant.
I mean, $1.4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1.449 maybe. So
About 1.4, I mean,
Yeah. the other cost real quick, just while we're on it, it's in the PD, but it's
the
gonna
other
be the
costs
same.
would occur in both cases, both the Butler building and the renovation.
Mhm.
The other costs will be,
Like furniture.
so it's like the things you mentioned.
Yep,
furniture
so building construction was that, site work would be more with a new Butler building, Rich, keep me honest, right? Because you're ripping everything out, so site work is more. You have any residential aesthetics that we want to add, landscaping, the environmental remediation, bonding costs, furniture costs. I don't think temporary electric service would be an issue. If there's any offsite improvements, so think curb cuts, think sidewalks. Inspection fees, there are ones that the borough can choose to waive, but there are ones that we can't. Relocation costs, maybe, owner furniture equipment, contingencies, construction management, and then solar array, and potentially fire suppression system, which we didn't talk about. So, you know, it follows the same premise that, you know, when you do less, there are ancillary things that are less. I don't have a magic ball. I can't say when we do the site work, we won't find like a hidden tank that exists, right? But based on the data that is presented to us, based on what we've been provided, I don't foresee anything hidden. You have 15 years of experience at the building. I'll welcome feedback from you as well, Rich. If you think of anything hidden.
No, I think to the structural engineer's point, the building is serviceable. I was asked months ago, can we renovate? I said, I think we can. I think we've validated the structural integrity with some minor tweaks and fixes that could be incorporated into the architectural plans. I think at the end of the day, the building serves the borough well, it serves the employees well. It's functional. If the building was obsolete and it didn't meet our needs, that's a completely different conversation. I think the fact that the 6 garage bays are there, the office space is there, the space for the employees is adequate, the function and flow within the site is adequate. And so the building is one piece of the DPW facility. I've said that from day one. The borough's DPW functions are both inside the site and with the building itself. So it meets our needs. I think we've confirmed some of this going through the scope engineering report that was presented tonight. If you have any questions regarding the roof proposals, I think Councilman pretty much touched upon all the milestones and next steps, the LSRP, environmental concerns, the AOCs. New building, I think, is going to generate additional site work, stormwater management. You're going to see increased costs with utilities. You're going to have to run in all new utilities, electrical, sanitary, water, gas. Renovating, you can leave all that in place. We've confirmed that those items appear to be serviceable. Yeah, there are some unknowns, but our plan, as we had said from day one, if we're going to renovate, we're going to open some of these walls up. So when we pick an architect, they can come in, they can take a look at what's going on, what's the extent of the termite damage, has the mold from the roof migrated into any other areas, what's the electrical look like? We know the panels are adequate. What's the wiring look like? You can open up a wall, it might be spaghetti, but it's fixable. It's not a complete redo or a new construction type expense. So yeah, there are a few unknowns like anything when you renovate a project, but I think we're fairly confident. We've done some due diligence here to move this thing forward.
And our LSRP was very clear of the renovation being less impactful on what we'd actually have to deal with. Once you open up the site, if it remains capped, there's different considerations than if we, built new and cleared all the blacktop and stuff away.
I think if I just make one other comment, and Councilman LaBarbera, I think you mentioned that when we spoke earlier, but I think it's worth repeating that if we are able to save some of that money, we can spend the money to improve the grounds. Because I really feel that it's a tremendous eyesore to that neighborhood. And we really should spend some money trying to make that a nice place.
100%.
And really invest in the landscaping around it, whether it be through trees or other methods, but figure out a better way to hide what's inside with that door when you drive by. So I really think that that's, if we are able to achieve the goals with the renovation and save some of the money for that external area, that's something that you mentioned
100%
earlier.
on board. And I agree with
It
that.
I
sounds like,
really think that that's extremely important for the neighbors.
it sounds like you're in support of this as well.
Yeah.
Is that it? And it sounds like you, so is there someone else? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so if that being said, unless there's an objection here, I wanted to do that quick straw poll just because when we get to 2023-57, obviously that's reliant on us agreeing as a
Correct.
governing body, that's the direction we want to go.
Correct.
Everyone's comfortable?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, so with that being said, why don't we move to police department?
Okay, do you want to talk the roof proposals as all to inform 57 or go to PD?
Let's move to
Check,
PD
check.
now and then
Okay. You got it.
we'll go through the resolutions.
Okay, next slide, number 7. Okay. So a huge thank you to many, many people, not only up here, but Teresa, Chief, Sobel. I mean, the amount of effort that went on between 23 January, this would have not happened without everybody. So I do need to recognize that this group moved mountains to provide this many updates.
Who's being modest? He did a lot, not all our work himself.
I'm gonna hit a couple main themes here, because there's subsequent details in here. We'll get to the redesign proposal. We're beginning discussions with state contracts for furniture. It's a cost that you have to have when you have a new building. On the tree front, we spent a lot of time talking about the trees around the site. Our goal is to save as many as we can. We know that the one in front, we cannot save because of the parking lot. It's very unfortunate, but all the other trees we're gonna look to save. With that said, I believe it's shade tree, correct me if I'm wrong. They have a list of the natives in town. We're gonna provide that to the landscape architect to make sure that whatever landscaping goes in is native. And I'm not gonna use the right terminology, but you have your trees, you have your underground, you have your shrubbery, all those components will go into it. There was a tremendous amount of work done on informing what our small town PD would look like. Ultimately, you'll see the main themes up there with what we're trying to target. Noise ordinance, we uncovered a potential requirement where when you have mechanicals, so think HVAC, think other types of mechanicals outside, it has to not only abide by our ordinance, but there's a state ordinance with how loud it can be. And this Kingsburg went through this process. So we're just gonna have to make sure that whatever we do is aligned not only with our ordinance, our state. We might have to change our noise ordinance depending on what the mechanicals come back with. We have plenty of time for this, but it's just something that we uncovered. Cable Associates, we'll talk a little bit about. This is the solar company, a little bit more than that, but we'll talk there. We're gonna talk LSRP in a second. This one was significant. So again, many thanks to Teresa, Chief, on this one. We went to the new Colts Neck Police Department. This was an Eli building. Former state barracks with a courthouse bolted onto it. The requirement to Eli was keep the exact same footprint, build 2 stories. Beautiful, looked great. The ultimate theme, and there's some really nuances here that I'm not going to get into. The ultimate theme was communication is so important. Communication important with Eli, communication is important amongst the council, communication is important with the public, right? We kept getting all these themes of communication as you go through schematic and design. And that's built into the redesign, you'll see it there. The other piece that's really, really, really important is that Teresa's counterpart and Chief, I believe it was the first lieutenant, have agreed that as we start and kick off, if the governing body decides to move forward, they would be part of our initial kickoffs where we deem we want them to help shed light on any possible, I'll call it landmine, inefficient step, whatever it may be, based on their process that they've gone to, which I think was really nice of them. We'll chip in to buy him some dinner. Maybe we'll do a dinner night one night. We did meet with our construction official, which was fantastic. We wanted to get a feel of his lead times, his standard operating practices, so that we could fit in our pace that we are, which we can. We'll be able to get him drawings before they go out to bid, which is really, really important, because you don't want to go out to bid and then there'll be some redesign and then you got to re-go out to bid. So just heading that off. The other piece here was Nick, who's the construction official, has worked closely with Eli before in the past. He knows of them. Nick is very well versed in cost reduction measures, is I believe how he qualified it. And Nick would be more than happy to be part of the process in the beginning to make sure that the maximum number of cost reduction measures are taken in. Other parking solutions, we talked about this. What other parking solutions exist? There's some ideas in the hopper, not enough to raise here, but it's an ongoing discussion. We will be having the financial discussion, Teresa, I believe, with bond counsel and the financial advisor, not only for PD, but also DPW. Chief's going to meet with his JCPL point of contact. I believe it was supposed to be this week, but we're pushing it to next week. Really what this boils down to is figuring out cost and timeline with the temporary service that's required. Because we're going to not be able to keep, there's a pole in front of PD where the electric service comes in. We need a temporary service in the meantime until all the infrastructure runs underground. And then a landmarks potentially be considered at Fisk. Next slide.
What was that last bullet? What does that mean?
A landmark. Do you want to take it, Chief? Mr. Mayor?
Recognition to the potential historical significance of that building.
Understood. Not landmark status.
Correct.
Oh, no.
Yes, that,
No landmark status. Thank you. I'll tweak that in the PowerPoint before I
yes,
send it out. Okay. Next slide. Awesome. So let's get into the LSRP. Okay. So if the team recalls correctly, there were, we met with CME on the 26th. We thought the assessment, the environmental assessment was 70% complete. It's actually done. Came in under budget. I forget by how much. I want to say acre, which is great. On the 27th, they provided their formal assessment via 3 documents. It was like 1,400 pages long. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. It was pretty lengthy. Ultimately, they identified 5 AOCs, 3 of which require further investigation. I'm going to come back to the underground storage tank. So there's a basement floor drain and a parts washer. We can work with CME, and we should expeditiously. And they're going to do some type of test. It's a dye and smoke test. I will defer to Rich on what that means and what it's testing, but ultimately it's the next step in the investigation process to know what remediation is required. Chief provided background to CME. There's really not too much concern placed there right now. The simple test will tell us what we have to worry about, if anything. Okay, the underground storage tank, a little bit of a curveball. Originally, it was thought to be 500-600 gallons. It's 2,000 gallons. Vent and cap are still there. In discussions with CME, Rich, Eli, we want that tank out as soon as possible, right? We don't need to rush, right? We don't have to like do an emergency appropriations to get it out, but before construction, if we can get out of there before construction, that's preferred. What we need to do next, and what CME is positioned to do, is conduct soil core bearings, soil borings. And they need to determine if there's any leakage from that. 2,000 tank is huge. When we look to take out, I should have put the picture up here with the PD. If you look on this, it's on, if I'm looking at the police departments on the left-hand side, there, what will potentially be over it, we're not 100% sure, or an agreement that this would obstruct it. There is a concrete pad with an HVAC system on top. Potentially that might have to come out when we excavate, but we're not there yet. Ultimately, we have to do the soil and see where it is, and see if any leakages happen. It could be in the soil, it could be in the water table. Pray that's not our curveball with to deal with, because that's a game changer. But there's some concern here, and we want to get CME's proposal as soon as we can to look at the soil. The other thing that their assessment identified was out of 65 materials they look at, 14 have asbestos levels in it. So all that means is that translates when we go to demo, you need a special contractor, certified contractor. I don't know what their certification is, but in order to remove these materials, not only to protect them, so they don't breathe in fiber, right, but that they then dispose of it appropriately and accordingly. Next slide. So I'm going to spend a little time about Gable Associates. So this was the entity that TGP recommended, Eli. I'm gonna boil down, and I really want to get to the next slide, but ultimately, you need a feasibility assessment to determine whether or not solar makes sense. And it's not just from an energy consumption level, there's so many other factors to include how you finance it, the investment credits that exist, which just changed, I believe, within the last year, that makes it more advantageous for a borough to purchase the solar panels as a part of having a third party come in and rent the kilowatts. And the primary difference and why Eli recommended them is they're an independent energy consulting firm. They're not a solar company. And they have a team of certified energy managers, certified measurement and verification professionals, and certified energy auditors that are part of this process. You have solar entities, consulting firms, et cetera, that are versed in residential, commercial, and then municipalities. This team specifically does municipalities. There was a list of references. They provided a sample feasibility assessment that we did, and that's their bread and butter. Next slide. When we look at kind of timeline and cost, if the governing body decides to move forward with the feasibility assessment, there's a couple things to keep in mind. They will produce a study for us and they will brief it to us here in public, just like Matt did. They say 2 to 3 weeks. If we ask to move that up a little bit, they would accommodate that. And the reason we want to do that is because we have the schematic and design pace with Eli, right? Or whomever we decide, right? I'm just saying it's contingent on if we move forward. But we want to make sure that the feasibility assessment's done, so we don't put something in the design that doesn't make sense. And this is standard operating procedure for Gable in this type of environment to work with the architect. There's a fixed fee of $4,500. If we decide to move forward with them, they recoup that cost, and then if we work with them, they would recoup that cost back to us, and we work with them on the total project to move forward with the solar project. For them, it doesn't matter how many sites they look at, 1, 4, 10, their flat fee stays the same. So it was assessed that since we're interested in DPW, we should have that included in there if we're going to determine to put a solar roof on the DPW. Include the PD, include the community center, because it's 2 separate buildings. And then also Borough Hall. There's no loss for us to get the feasibility assessment. Whether we decide to do solar on Borough Hall, hypothetically today versus tomorrow, it doesn't matter. You still have the feasibility stuff to inform that. The one thing I wanted to note here that's really important, if we go above $6,600, so i.e. if we get the assessment back from Gable pending approval, and we decide to move forward with them pending approval, and the cost is greater than $6,600, we will have to follow the standard process to get more proposals, so we have, enough to look at.
Is there any interest in having them also look at the at Fairhaven Fields, the snack bar facility?
Think of that.
And then I know Board of Education controls the schools, but if we're paying the money and it's a fixed fee, do we want them to look at the schools, or are we just delaying getting the report back?
I think we delay getting the report back. Okay. I think separating municipal from school makes the most sense because we have more control over municipal facilities and what happens. So
just let me just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
The proposal provides up to 4 borough sites.
That's what it says, 4.
4.
I can email them and ask if they're willing to add in Fairhaven Fields for the same cost. You would just need an updated proposal to review, correct? Okay. Would we still be able to get approval from the
Well, it
governing body?
depends. I mean, if it's something de minimis, like where they don't increase the, flat fee, then no, then we would need another proposal. But if the proposal goes up, then you'd have to,
Check.
they'd have to submit another proposal.
Okay,
Can I ask a question?
please.
If you're going to include something like the Borough Hall, well, that won't matter as much, but the concession stand, Fairhaven Fields, do you need to do a structural assessment of that building to see that it could handle the weight of the solar panels?
Sure, I think they're kind of mutually exclusive, but also related at the same time, right? So they can do their feasibility assessment. I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward with the concession stand until I know it can handle the load, but we still need the feasibility assessment. So,
Right.
Well, Councilwoman, part of the scope of services provides that they'll look at any potential technical complications for the installation of a solar project. So I believe that would encompass, the structural integrity, if it can, support it.
How do they do a study on a police department building that isn't designed yet?
So they'll look at all the historical. And then they'll look at what the proposed solar array is, which is that 1,500 to 2,000 square foot. They'll build in all these calculations. And they have all of these models that they factor in. And that's why looking at all their certified individuals paired with civil engineers, all of those components, they provide, you know, it's not a guess, they provide kind of an assessment. Yeah.
If we're keeping the trees on the western side, that's gonna impact a lot of the sunlight if it's a one-story building. So as we design it, they're gonna know all these things, I'm sure.
Copy that.
Yeah, that's gonna be a hindrance for sure.
Yeah. And I kind of envision in, you know, like a kickoff call for them, so to speak, right? So they're tracking all of these variables. The one thing I like is the third bullet on the left-hand side where they say, you know, the deliverers provided, second bullet, first bullet. The deliverable for study includes a PowerPoint slide deck report that summarizes finding results and recommendations. I must have took it out. Basically, they won't issue the final slide deck until it takes into account all of our components that we're interested in.
Can I just add to what Councilman Rodriguez said? I think you said in the very first slide that we're committed to keeping every single tree of the mature trees in the property. I do think we should look at whether we want to keep all the trees. I don't know that that some of those trees are necessarily the healthiest or the prettiest on that west side there.
Check.
Against the other neighbor, right? I think we should look at those trees and make sure that those are trees we want to keep. There are trees you can have that don't impede solar, but can still hide the police departments, especially because it's going to be a one-story building. So I'm not arguing in favor or against. I'm just saying that I don't think we should do a blank. We are committed to saving every tree.
Check,
I
fair.
think we should have landscape study to figure out how to make it beautiful, how to have the trees there. But how to, if we decide to do something like solar, we are going to be saving many thousands of trees through solar. We could probably arrange to have something else that would not impede it. So I just would suggest we have an open mind.
Copy that, makes sense. Yeah, and listen, if the tree's not healthy, doesn't make it safe. I think our intent is, we're not going in with an intent to remove everything.
Right.
Our intent is going in to be conscious of what is there and what we can salvage and save. Let's do it. But there is a give and take, I think, too.
I would just, suggest we have some balance on that.
Perfect. I think that's
On
great.
that commitment.
Yep. Next slide. Or anything else on Gable? Okay. All right, so let's get into the redesign. So on the 23rd, we agreed to move forward with option E, which was the one-story PD, community center with public restrooms. We sent our initial list of requirements, and again, you'll see the appendices where all of this is documented. So when this is made public, everybody will be able to see it. We initially got 4 drafted documents. We sent 35 comments back after we got the documents. Ultimately received a version 2 of those initial documents that were passed to the governing body and the governing body attorney. Next slide. Some key components just to hit this, many meetings, discussions and whatnot, but just kind of boiling the bottom line up top. So it outlines an estimated 6650 square foot PD, 1600 square foot community center. Estimates, hasn't been designed yet, right? It's a ballpark thing. We're going to meet required energy standards. We're going to be LEED-like, as we talked about. It's going to be in accordance with the new 2021 IBC codes, as well as many other new requirements, especially on ADA and stormwater management. Single electrical service comes into the site. Community centers feed off of the PD. We're going to use a standard construction management portal for all the documents just to streamline efficiencies. This is the really important. So if you remember from the Colts Neck PD tour, right, where we talked about communication, what we've worked within our proposal is that we'll have our kickoff call, and there'll be key people there, right? The construction official, potentially Gable, a couple other folks, but we're going to meet every 2 weeks during the schematic phase. We are going to target having our open house with our residents as soon as possible. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's a day, a week, 2 weeks, but the goal is as soon as possible. 3D renderings, inside and out, side parcels, that everybody can get a quote unquote feel for what this looks like. We'll also be briefing the planning board in the next 2 or 3 weeks to give them a status update so that they know what to expect when it comes, because that cursory review is tradition or required or a little bit of both.
Capital review is, I believe it's required.
Required, thank you, sir. And then we'll switch to 1 month, like formal meetings. Just everybody is tracking, when you have a formal meeting with an architect, it actually takes the architect away from what they're doing to prepare for it, whatnot. So that's why we were a little bit balanced there. That doesn't mean email communication, phone communication, that is likely gonna happen on the daily. We talked about the building renderings, the small town charm we already hit. The construction is assessed to take 12 months, which is less than what was previously 2 months to demolish. And then one of the most important pieces, which is really important to me, and I think will be important to everybody, is I want to see what the cost comparison is from option A to option B as he goes throughout this process. Right? It won't be quite apples to apples. There are some variables that are just impossible to have be equal, but we can get a ballpark idea based on reduction in square footage, less site work, construction time, et cetera, what that looks like. Ultimately, his assessment and his cost will then be gut checked against a bid. When we go out to bid, because the contractor, whoever selected, would provide a cost estimate and whatnot. So multiple pieces here, but this is called out in the proposal that we want this formalized cost savings analysis. Next slide. Some other supporting redesign details. So construction administration. So when construction happens, construction is considered the primary period in the project. TGP is going to be on site at least 26 times throughout that period. So think every 2 weeks, sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's on average. We went through the generator. So if anybody knows the current generator right now, it's actually a residential generator. It was there put in an interim solution, multiple meetings, multiple discussions, but diesel was the ultimate way to go. There's 2 appendices that talk about that, talk about the requirement of a fuel source that won't be interrupted in the case of a natural disaster. Talked about actually the efficiencies and how many more iterations diesel generators have gone, and actually sometimes are more cost efficient, which was kind of really counterintuitive to my brain. Fire suppression, I want to spend a minute here. This is not required by code. Just want to say that, not required by code. Doesn't matter the institutional use of the cells, Class B building use of the building, not required. However, we need to have a discussion on whether or not we want to have fire suppression, i.e. sprinklers, in the PD building. The estimate is that costs 80,000 square feet, 80,000 bucks for the sprinkler system. My research shows about $5 per square. So if you look at both community center and PD, you're talking like 50 grand, but 80,000 being extremely conservative. What I did confirm with Eli would be no additional costs, right? Right now, it's not in the proposal. But if the governing body decides that I want to move forward with Eli too, we want to add the extra cost of fire suppression. There's no additional cost for engineering and architect as long as we identify that requirement during the schematic phase.
Has anyone reached out to Chief Brister to see if he has a recommendation on that? On whether that might be a good,
Okay.
Allied. Did you talk to the people at Allied? They do the fire suppression. They might be able to give you a estimate. of what it
Yeah.
costs for it.
I don't think we have any issue getting the estimates and whatnot. I just, if the governing body didn't want to entertain fire suppression purely for what the cost might be, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of doing the research. If the governing body assesses that, hey, if Chief Brister is good with it or recommends it and we get quotes and whatnot, it makes sense to go forward. I just want to hit it as early as possible so we don't get charged with the redesign costs if we come about.
I'd like to know what Chief Brister says. I want to know if it's best practice.
Okay.
You know, that's my personal opinion.
Okay.
You know.
We'll find out.
Is there a suppression system at the DPW?
No,
No.
there is they call it something else, monitoring alarm systems.
It's an alarm.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that in terms of safety, there should be one?
At PD or DPW?
DPW.
I mean, you phrased it in such a way where you're saying in terms of safety, I mean, depends on the situation.
Is it in terms of safety?
Yeah, I think it's a cost generated decision. We were told it's gonna be about 100K or so at TPW. And
I think it's a
you
little
have
high.
to- You have to look at the fact that the majority of the time, the guys or the employees are out working in the field. There's limited employees there. If there's increased measures of egress, if there's adequate fire alarm system, you know, you gotta look at everything, the layout of the building. My first initial, when I saw the estimates, was maybe that's something we can strike out for now and revisit
For DPW.
for DPW.
Okay.
Because it's a considerable cost. And it's, just to be clear, it's not required by code. So I'd be interested to see what the fire official even says, in addition to the fire chief. And, you know, maybe do a little more research too on the topic in itself, rather than just say yes or no tonight.
Copy that, and we have time, right? If the governing body were to decide to move forward with the proposal tonight, the schematic phase is a month. So even if it started on February 1st and we got, you know, swag costs, we spoke to Chief Brister, maybe we asked him to come on the 6th, right? To put it on the record with what his assessment is. We're still in a position that we're not going to initiate or trigger redesign costs. So I think it's a smart, I think it's a safe move.
The other thing to consider is there's the initial cost for the installation. The system in the building, tying into the water system in the street. But then there's also an annual service they have to do, inspections, regular maintenance. So it's a continued uncaptured cost as long as the building exists. We actually have a small system here in the utility room. So we have to get it inspected, we have to bring professionals in, they always find something doesn't work right, didn't pass, the PSI wasn't correct or whatever it is. And then you start cutting POs and getting the vendors in here to do whatever repairs are made. So
Just, you know,
just a different situation because it's only a partial,
totally.
so.
If you have somebody in a jail cell, it would seem intuitively to me, seem like we should have a
Well, I think
fire
that,
suppression
I think
system.
that, you know, I'm actually surprised that it wasn't required.
Yeah,
He said it wasn't required. I think that when you have a building that has records that you eventually pay forever.
Yeah.
Right, I think it would be smart to have a fire suppression. And if it's not the code yet, I'm sure it's coming.
So if you want the detail, right? When you get over more than 5 cells is where you trigger that it becomes a requirement. The New Jersey, I forget the name of the entity where the codes are handled out of, Department of Community Affairs. Where the code isn't explicitly clear is if you have people sleeping in the building overnight, right? Which in a cell, you may not hit the number 5, which triggers that it has to be a code. But in the cell, you literally could have somebody sleep something off for the night. And by them sleeping in there, the code, the new code, the 2021 code is not clear whether or not that triggers the standard. You know, I just want to make sure that we balance, you know, these ideas of maintenance and all of that with what the goal of fire suppression is, which is to save life. And you never want to use it, but you hope you have it when you need it.
Right.
With that being said, we'll circle up with Chief Brister this week. We'll do this week before February 6th meeting. Talk up with Chief Brister. We have a couple of contacts. They get costs to gut check this 80 grand. And who can we talk to see if the pressure is sufficient?
I already made a note for New Jersey American Water, that's a testing.
You mean in the street?
That's where it would have to be tested. You have to have enough pressure in the
That's
street.
another issue. You gotta make sure that the main in the street can handle
The increased pressure.
the fire suppression system for the building.
But there may be a fee involved for New Jersey American Water, like there are with fire hydrants. We also have our official fire marshal, Paul Murphy, who would, I'm sure, weigh in on this also.
So maybe we could start there before we incur our costs. If he says that there's no way the pressure's good, okay. But if he's like, no, the pressure's good.
He wouldn't know that. I put a note to ask him about fire official and also check with New Jersey American Water on what the actual cost or requirements on their end are.
Check. So we'll come back on the 6th with more.
Mhm.
We're okay as far as time and schedule with informing it.
Okay.
The not to exceed, this was a really important piece that I wanted to call out. And we'll go over what the cost is for PD in a second, the redesign. But if there's no changes, the professional service fee is fixed, doesn't go up. This is what it is. I didn't want to get into a scenario where, hey, we want this, we want that, hey, we want fire suppression, we don't, well, it's gonna cost you an extra grand now, that's all cut out of it. It's all done. The AIA, this is another really important document. I was talking with our council a little bit before. So this AIA, it's a standard document between, an owner and an architect. This is where basic services are outlined. Learning moment for me, basic services isn't like the bottom tier package for the architect, it's just what they call it. Anything that falls out of what the basic services are called additional services. This is where you get into payment schedules. This is where you get into defining each phase, all of those components. It's a 20-something page document. Eli's working on this, and this is very, very important for our council to look at. They did before back in 21, I believe it was, but this will be a new one. And it's really important because again, quite frankly, it holds the architect accountable to what we expect. You won't get paid X until you deliver on Y. You won't get paid Z until you deliver on A, right? Really, really important. Acoustics consultation, again, this was another learning moment. So because we're looking to put the mechanicals outside on that roof with the solar array and getting back to the requirement on the noise ordinance, you actually have an acoustics consult come in and they inform the mechanical engineer and they make sure that everything fits within what the sounds are being emitted by the mechanicals. If the equipment we pick is louder than it should be, there's sound absorbing panels and different things you can do. So really important to call out. And then landscape. And this just hits back what we talked about, the native trees. Okay, so let's get into the costs. Everybody can see this. Oh yeah, all right, cool. You can try, see what it does. So bottom line, the redesign costs of the PD plus the community center, you're at $261 all in. There's a $20,000 expense there for expenses that are incurred. This is standard. And then there's also expenses on the software to support the construction documentation process. That's Oracle. On the right-hand side, you see a breakdown of percentages of each phase to the total cost. When you look at the initial proposal from 2021, the initial PD proposal from 2021 came in at $302,400. This PD, if you half the expenses, comes in around $239,000, which is a 26% decrease, right? If you remember back to our initial discussions, we talked about a 30 to 50% savings by redesigning and going through the same architect by SNP. The other gut check that we did was we looked at the total square footage of the PD in the community center, which comes out to $8,250. If you recall, our data point on the price per square foot for an office building adjusted for inflation is $560. So the design fees would vary between $369,000 and $462,000. That's the 8 to 10%, which I've been told is kind of an industry standard. You base the percentage of the design fees off the subtotal of the cost. So all that to say, Eli articulated he can come in 30 to 50% lower. Looking at his 2021 proposal to today, he's 26% less than what that was, and that doesn't include any inflation over the last couple of years. Then when you gut check against the 8 to 10% standard, he comes in 35 to 48% lower. This was a very important piece to me. There were many moments throughout the entire process where Eli articulated certain data points and facts, and so this breaks it down. Next slide. Proposed schedule. So just want to talk through this a little bit, right? Redesign, if governing body decides to move forward, we target February to initiate, and then our schedule kickstarts to help us target breaking ground in September, October. The one piece here, and this is why I really want to come back for a moment and articulate the significance of going through the redesign, having the hard conversations, taking a little extra time to do this. You have the subtotal construction cost of the building. You can estimate what that is. You can say 560 square, you can say 450 square, right? The industry says 560 adjusted for inflation. But all these other costs that kind of creep up on you. So I want to go through these just to really educate, because this was an education for me. So you have your building construction, you have your site work, residential aesthetics. Colts Neck spent an extra $300 grand to make their PD I'm not gonna say more residentially friendly, but just more friendly for the architecture with where they popped it, right? Landscaping, environmental remediation, we talked about that already. Bonding costs, furniture costs, the temporary electric service, there's a cost there. Off-site improvements, sidewalk, curbs, inspection fees, relocation costs. Is DPW, I'm making this purely up on the whim, is DPW available to help the team move? Is it volunteers? Do we have to get a company, right? All those decisions have to be made, but there's a potential cost there. Owner furnished equipment, contingencies, you do have to have contingencies, things come up. Construction management, charging provisions, solar array, fire suppression system, right? The goal of this is to educate and cement the fact that the governing body collectively assessed that a smaller PD is important. We landed at 2,000 square feet. And that cost savings is really, really important when you start to look at all the other costs that are going to be part of this. You can't ignore this when we look at it. It's really, really important. And then so on and so forth, ultimately getting to that 1 month. So if we started construction September, October, you're talking a year. So September, October of 2024 is when ideally you target to move in. Next slide. So last slide, I know this was a lot, but had some feedback to slow down. So hopefully I slowed down a little bit on PowerPoint. But last slide, the rest of it is all appendices which everybody can review. So the decision comes down to a couple different components tonight. One, do we go with Eli and do we move forward? Two, do we begin the feasibility assessment, which will inform that? And then these are some of the other proposed next steps. That AIA has to get finalized. We'd have to execute the proposal, obviously. Begin the schematic phase. I think it's really prudent on us to have a kickoff call. We don't just say Eli, go. We have a kickoff call. I would feel better if Nick was there. I'd feel better if other people in the town, you know, the people in planning, zoning, Rich, et cetera, whoever, right? Just to be there, be vested in it. We need a detailed project plan outlining all the steps and the contingencies. It's already in progress. We're working across the board to do that together. Me, Kristen, Rich. Begin the construction manager discussion. We need to have a discussion, and it's not now. This is probably a 2-month decision point away. Do we have a construction manager? The one wild card factor here is really getting ahead of our skis a little bit. Whatever contractor comes in, they might have a PM, right? That manages the project, reports back. So just something to think about, right? That might be embedded in that cost. Don't know. We do want to identify the viable parking lot solutions, right? Whether that's using the lot next door and having some type of special relationship set up, but that's something that residents continue to articulate. You know, we're putting all this new infrastructure in, that path between Fisk and the fields, it all makes sense. And we just want to make sure people can park. We have to have the financial discussion, maybe some work there with ordinances. We have time there, nothing of alarm. We need to work with CME, irrespective of what we do, right? CME, we have to get the proposal from them and work through, and I'll work with Teresa on that. I think we need to initiate the feasibility assessment and then ultimately identify costs of the temporary JCP electric service. So that is the overview in the nutshell. The trigger point is if the governing body decides to move forward with Eli, governing body accepts Gable, we then initiate this and we start our clock. You guys, if you recall correctly, have been saying it the last couple of weeks. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Before we move to resolutions, comments on police department?
So kind of similar question that I had in BPW. Can you remind us what was the original estimate for the police department? And with all the changes we're making, 1 floor, 2,000 square feet. I know it's ballpark, but what are we looking at? Are we saving $1 million? Are we saving $2 million? Do we have an idea how much we're saving? Because we're paying an extra $260,000 to Eli. Is it going, do we think it's going to be a material reduction in costs? You know, just considering that we are also in a highly inflationary environment. So every moment we wait, it costs more. So where do we think we are in terms of savings?
Yep, so it's multi-pronged answer, so just give me a second. So the original design, I believe, was 8650. That included a storage police building, did not include the community center. At 560 square, the building sub costs, right, not all the other components, is 4.844 million. The PD now that's being proposed, not including the community center, 6650.
6650.
Square footage.
Square footage,
Oh, okay.
which is a subtotal cost of 3.72 million. Difference of 1.12 million.
So the difference of building what we have now on paper and what we'll have when we have all these changes made is only $1 million.
So that is from the square footage. What we can estimate right now is the reduction in site work. Because we got rid of the double driveway, right? There's less there. We can't estimate what the reduction in schedule is. The original construction schedule was, I believe, 6 months longer. We can't add that. And then the fourth component, hang on, I want to.
The 1.12 though, I don't think includes the community center,
Correct.
because it wasn't originally built into the number. So do you remember he had quoted us on the community center though? I don't remember. I want to say it was $200,000-300,000, but I might be wrong. Remember?
But that is not gonna
We
change.
didn't finalize the design.
But the
right,
community
so it was a rough
center,
guesstimate.
the community center design won't change so much. What's really changing is the police building. And the 260,000 in additional architectural fees is really paying for flattening out that, bringing it from 2 stories to 1 story, getting rid of the basement, getting rid of the back of the garage and so on. I think it's a good plan, but I just want to say my initial reaction is I hope we're gonna save more than $1 million by the time we're done with this, because it's an awful lot of architectural fees. And the reduction after everything in cost is not as much as, at least for me, as I would like to see. But maybe there's nothing we can do about it. It's just my initial reaction. So,
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, Councilman Knapp. I think one of the things that we haven't talked about are the incentive programs, the tax rebates from the state of New Jersey for the installation of solar power. We hadn't talked about that. There's a savings there. And you bring up a good point. I still, there's so much unknown. I think we're being conservative in this model, but there will be additional opportunities for savings, and inflation's coming down, if anything, which is beneficial to us.
I may be misunderstanding you. We compared, it was a 1.12 savings.
When you look at the.
$1,120,000, but the Eli cost was $281,000.
so
But what I'm saying is the 1.12 difference would be greater if you added the cost of the newer community center to the old quote that Eli gave us for the bigger building, because it wasn't included, it was just a garage then. He had quoted us, if you're gonna build this other building, you're gonna spend an extra 200, I think, don't
so
quote
you're
me.
saying the actual savings is more like $1.5 million? because
No,
the
I'm
community
saying
center
when you,
on an
because
apples to apples
Because
basis.
we were at 1.12, so I think that 200 to 300 is going to make it $1 million. I think it would be slightly less than that. Trust me, there's no one up here that doesn't want to pay an architect more money, but if we can pay the money and save more money because of that, and have a right-sized building that fits the environment in which we're putting it there for, and then we don't have to heat these extra spaces that we don't need, we don't have to cool them. I think over the long run, I think it's the better decision for the borough.
And to the point of the 281 that we're quoting, that includes DPW as well?
Negative.
Okay,
No.
so it only includes the PD and
PD's
the
220.
community center.
PD's
Yeah.
229, community center's 31,
Okay.
and then the 20 grand on top. And it's important to discern
Yeah.
between that, right? Because
That's right.
the 229 proposal, we have an apples to apples comparison.
Yes.
2 years ago, Eli's proposal for PD was 302, right? So we know it's a 26% reduction. To answer your question, the police storage building per Eli's original estimate was $346,090. That police storage outside facility is now gone. It's built into the PD itself. He quoted $225,688 subtotal cost for a community room enclosure. So the community room was enclosed in the police storage. Not quite apples to apples, but police storage gone.
So in just a second, I just want to make sure I just want to understand the
Copy
numbers.
that.
When we're saying the savings is about $1 million or something more than that, is that including the Eli additional costs, meaning like we actually saving?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or we saving $750?
After we've already paid Eli,
After
we save
paying
$1 million.
Eli, our savings is over $1 million.
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that I understand that. I mean, I would just say that it is a significant savings. It's less than I would have liked to see. Maybe there's more in it that will come through. You know, it sounds a little bit like completely do a lot of work, additional work for some savings, not awful lot. I mean, I'm not sure if everybody else feels it differently, but it's not a tremendous amount of savings. That's what I'm saying. We should really make sure that we, as we work with Eli, we try to find
Totally.
the best approach so that we don't end up in the same place we were before financially.
100%
After
agree.
all this work we're having, I fear that, you know, there are always things that happen that might not be expected
Mhm.
when you're dealing with construction and so on. And I would hate for us to go through all this work and end up in the same financial place we were before.
Yeah,
Had we
and
gone ahead.
I had the same thought, right? You know, we go through all this work and we don't stay on top of communications, we don't keep it tight, and then we end up in a similar situation. Something that's been raised, I think it's a great point raised, and I think it just further echoes the criticalness of communication, staying on top of this, tracking it daily, and making sure there's no scope creep.
Right.
I mean, and I think you raise a really solid point, and Nick, the construction official that we talked to, specifically hit it at those cost reduction measures, one of which is, you know, having one service come in. So I think you make a phenomenal point, and I think it's every intent that we maximize the cost savings. My conservativeness here is making sure we don't over-promise and then under-deliver what the cost savings is, but there's certain things I just can't calculate.
Well, we never bid it out, so we don't know what the true cost savings is. Had we bid it out in the last council, we would know.
Correct.
So, you know, we're not going to have that information. The other thing I want to say is saving $1 million over a 30-year period may not seem like a lot of money, but if you're cutting from 4,000 square feet down to 2,000 square feet, your square footage cost is going to drop, obviously, and you're going to save, I don't know what it is, like 25% on the total cost of just the PD building. So that $1 million is significant from a percentage
It
perspective.
might be also significant from a maintenance perspective because you're maintaining a lot less, right?
Right.
That's what you're
All the
saying.
utilities.
I also want to point out, I understand why you're saying in the big scheme of things, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when we looked at the old building and we were looking for cost saving measures, we were only being able to extract that. I forget the number, it was like $120,000 or something like that. That was it. So this is 10 times that.
No,
from a
and
savings
believe me, I
standpoint.
actually like this design
Yeah.
better, because of all of the aesthetic reasons we discussed in the last meeting. Is just that, I guess, just want to express the hope that we're not gonna have a creep up of the costs and end up in the same place.
Same place.
That's the one thing. The other thing is, and it's kind of a question for Rich, and I'm assuming the water table there in the PD is not that high. Hopefully you don't have groundwater contamination, but if there is any, that can take months to resolve. So I would second the view that we should get CME working on this thing immediately. And I don't see it here in our resolutions, but I would suggest that we might want to move on that as quickly as possible. Just because, I mean, I dealt with groundwater contamination before in a prior home, and it took 6 months or more. I can't remember exactly how long for all the treatment and for the tests to come out clean, and that could substantially delay us.
We talked about that on our Zoom call with them this past week. And Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we asked them to prepare a new proposal to do soil borings.
Yeah.
For any potential contamination in the soil. And then also encompass any other work that's required. We did bring that up, obviously, because that is a concern if there is contaminated soil as it reached the water table.
We'll follow up with CME and see if we can get their proposal and it follows process maybe for our meeting next Monday. Because I'm with you, this concerns me, just because I don't know.
It could delay the entire project.
We have 12 months until the demolition happens, right? So we have a year, but we don't want to wait a year. So we do have time, right? I don't know what the standard is if it's in groundwater. I don't want to play that what if game, but we'll work with CME, see if we get a proposal, work with Teresa, see if somehow we can position for approval on the 6th, that CME can get out there. They said it's a 1-day site visit. Do all their tests, check it, you know, get their assessments and find it out. So
on it.
I want to make sure too, I'm just mentioning this out loud, when we do get to point of demolition in regards to asbestos, I'm a little concerned about that as far as its proximity to the community center, kids, everything moving around. I don't know what the solution is.
Scott, it'll be in the bid, because the contract will be responsible for demolition and
Understand,
the restoration.
from a communication standpoint though, to our residents, to let them know, hey, we're knocking this building down. You know, it makes me a little uneasy if in the middle of July, it's dry out and this stuff starts swirling all over the place. That's all I'm saying.
The best
I'm sure there's a
of
certain way to
It has
do
to
it,
be-
but
Building has to be sealed.
Okay.
And there's a protocol for removing all.
So
Great.
you're just saying communicate that.
great.
Yeah.
I think we should let everyone know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Copy that. It's great, great.
Anyone have any other questions before we move along here? I'm gonna move good of the borough ahead of the resolutions. I think we should hear from the community before we go ahead and vote. If there's anyone in the public, please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please try to observe a time limit of 3 minutes. Anyone in the public have a public comment? No? Allison, is there anyone on Zoom?
Nobody has their hand raised up. We're going to start for Chef.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, y'all. Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Thank you for all your work on the buildings. We've got a bad echo.
We hear you. The first line was a little jarbled, but we hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to make,
Name and address, please.
yes, 71 Sarah Fischel, 71 River Lawn Drive here in Fairhaven. When you talk to the municipal expert on solar installations, I'd like you to ask if they're also equipped to look at battery storage to go along with that.
Sure.
And then there's, and then if that comes through, then there's a whole question of integration with the generator, which can all happen, but does not have to happen in 2024. So we just want people to be planning ahead.
Sarah, would you mind sending an email on the battery aspect, just so I have the correct terminology when we go to Gable? That'd be really, really helpful.
Oh, sure. Where do you want me to send it?
You can send it to my Borough email, alabarbera@fhborough. Can you also include Kristen on it?
If I can find everybody's email addresses, yes, I can.
On the website.
Sarah, if you don't mind me asking, do you have expertise in this category?
Only as an interested amateur.
Okay. I was just saying, if you had expertise, I was going to ask you to lend us your opinion. Every opinion is helpful.
If I may make a comment on that, I think that's a good question. And in fact, we discussed this with myself and Councilman Barbera earlier today. The advantage of potentially having a battery is that in the case of a power outage of the whole town, you would enable the solar panels to continue operating. If we don't have a battery, the solar panels would not be able to continue to operate because there has to be a mechanism that turns off the electricity from the street to the house, to the building, and from the building to the street, so that essentially you're not accidentally setting energy back into the grid on a power outage. So that's why your solar panels cannot operate unless you have that mechanism that seals it off from the street and allows you to just work with the battery. So
Or you potentially need a much smaller generator.
I was going to say, wouldn't the generator still go though, or no?
Well, it would,
It would.
if the way the battery would work, my understanding is it's basically a battery backup, right? The battery will hold the energy and then it will convert it into AC energy for a limited amount of time. Once those batteries get weak, then the generator would come on. I don't know how long those batteries last or how many you need, how do you store them? You need a room just to store them, I would imagine.
So when the power kicks out, the batteries actually, battery runs first before the generator.
Correct, it would power for whatever limited time they need, depending on what would run it, and once they don't load the generator.
It's almost like
but
a
it
UPS.
allows the solar system
Yeah,
to keep
that's
operating.
I just don't know how much room that.
Yeah.
Like.
Not almost like it is a UPS, and then with more sophisticated kind of transfer switch, blah, 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 I'm on the edge of what I know. You can have a much smaller generator. You don't have to, in general, be able to take a whole load on the generator because you can still use the
The
solar to be charging, the solar is charging the battery, the generator's charging the battery is running the building.
Right, so it's just something to keep in mind, even if we don't do it right now, it's just a good thing to know that if we do ever decide we want that option, it does enable for the building to potentially continue to operate independently with its own solar panel, even though it might have the entire town with an outage, so.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just right, real quick, Chris, right, UPS uninterrupted power supply, just we're all tracking means there's no disruption in service, right? So if you're on your laptop and you're connected into the electricity, the UPS source means that if the power went out, the UPS source kicks in such a manner, you don't even realize it on your computer. Just to give a metaphorical example, I'm looking at the tech guy, because that's something we use like standard in tech practice. So,
And we have them on both for.
yeah,
Computer radio.
yep,
And
exactly.
it takes 12 seconds for the generator power.
Right, you gotta make sure that whole section is covered.
Allison, is there anyone else on Zoom? Their hand up?
No.
No. All right, with that being said, I'm gonna move towards resolutions, starting with 2023-55. The resolution is to accept and approve a proposal from the Goldstein Partnership for a new police building and a community center. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second,
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Howie? Yes. Hodge?
yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Neff?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2023-56. This is a resolution to accept and approve proposal from Gable Associates for energy consulting services. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second,
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Howie?
Yes.
Hodge?
yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Neff?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yeah,
Thank you. Resolution 2023-57. This resolution to accept and approve a proposal from Roof Maintenance Systems for re-roofing of the DPW building and a portion of Borough Hall. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second,
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Council members Howie?
Yes.
Hodge?
yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Neff?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
yes.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone that contributed to tonight, and I look forward to keeping the momentum as we turn the calendar here into February. Adjournment 8:28 p.m. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 8:28 p.m.
Okay, we're working for that.